Hey everyone, and welcome back for another deep dive with us. Today we're looking at something that's been on a lot of people's minds lately.
Yeah, it really has.
It's the impact of these big tech companies on small businesses and all the independent workers out there.
Right.
We've got some interesting excerpts here.
Yeah, we do.
From Dmitrii Gorbatenko LogBook, The Dark Side of Big Tech's Profit-Driven Expansion. The Destruction of Small Business and Independent Livelihoods. So
that's a mouthful.
It is quite a title.
Yeah.
But we want to really get into it and see, how is this expansion of these big tech companies affecting all these different sectors, and what does it mean for us, for the future?
Exactly. And this source really digs into how these major players like, your Amazons, your Ubers, your Apples,
right,
how they've gotten so huge. And it's not just about, scaling up or branching out. They're really trying to establish a dominant presence to kind of squeeze out the competition.
So it's almost like they're not just playing the game, they're like changing the rules of the game.
Yeah, in a way you could say that. And that's where it gets a little worrying, because the source argues that this kind of dominance can have some serious consequences for those small businesses and independent workers.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense, I guess.
Like take the music industry, for example.
Yeah.
You've got Spotify, super convenient. You can find pretty much any song you want.
I use it all the time.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
But what about the artists? What about the people who actually make the music?
Yeah, what about them? I never really thought about that.
Well, this source highlights a really important point about streaming services like Spotify.
Okay.
They only pay artists a tiny fraction of a penny per stream.
Really?
Yeah, we're talking fractions so small that an artist would need millions of streams just to make minimum wage.
Millions. Wow. Okay. So even if you have, a decent following on Spotify as an artist, it's still
a huge struggle.
Really tough to make a living.
Exactly. And for independent musicians who are just starting out, it makes it incredibly difficult to even achieve some kind of financial stability.
Wow.
And it's not just music. We're seeing this pattern pop up in other sectors too.
Oh, really? Like where?
Especially in what we call the gig economy.
Oh, you mean like those ride-sharing apps and the food delivery things? Everyone uses those.
Exactly. And they're all about, empowering people to be their own boss.
Right, right.
But the reality is a bit more complicated.
Oh, right. How so?
Let's take taxi drivers, for example. They used to have a fairly predictable income. But now with Uber and Lyft, they're facing a whole new ballgame.
Okay, so what's changed?
Well, these platforms, they use algorithms to change prices in real time.
Oh, so that's that dynamic pricing thing I've heard about.
Exactly. And during busy times, prices surge, which can be good for the platform and maybe even the driver.
Okay.
But when demand is low, those fares plummet.
I see.
And drivers end up making way less for the same amount of work.
So the algorithm is really calling the shots, not the driver.
Pretty much. And it's not just the fluctuating fares either. The platforms take a big chunk of each ride, further reducing what the drivers actually earn. And on top of that, drivers have to cover all their own expenses like gas and maintenance insurance.
Yeah.
All that cuts into their take-home pay.
So it's not as stable as they make it sound.
Not really.
Yeah.
And is it the same for the delivery drivers, like on DoorDash or Grubhub?
I would imagine so, yeah.
Very similar. The promise is flexibility, being your own boss.
Right.
But what you often get is low base pay, unpredictable tips, and fees that just eat into your earnings.
You're always hustling, but you're not really in control.
Exactly. And the source argues that this whole model of prioritizing profit over people can actually destabilize entire industries.
Wow. So it's like these apps seem convenient.
Right.
But they could be having a much bigger impact on the economy than we realize.
Like a ripple effect.
Yeah.
What seems like a small change in one area can end up affecting jobs and wages and even how a whole industry functions.
That's kind of scary when you think about it.
It can be. The source uses the term unsustainable business model to describe big tech's approach.
Unsustainable business model. What does that actually mean?
It means that focusing on short-term profits and ignoring the well-being of workers and the long-term health of the market, it can actually create a system that eventually collapses on itself.
So like, how would that happen? Can you give me an example?
Imagine these platforms keep automating jobs to cut costs.
Okay.
So delivery drivers, taxi drivers, they're all replaced with self-driving vehicles.
Yeah.
What happens to all the people who relied on those jobs for income?
That's a lot of people.
Exactly.
And it doesn't seem very sustainable.
No, it's not. And the source also argues that this drive for profit can stifle innovation.
Really? I always thought big tech was all about innovation.
That's the image they project.
Right.
But true innovation, it needs a diverse marketplace where new ideas and approaches can actually compete fairly.
So if just a few companies dominate everything, that actually limits the potential for new things.
That's the argument. Less competition usually means less choice for consumers and less incentive for companies to really push the boundaries.
So it's not just about, fairness for workers. It's about making sure our economy can keep growing.
It is.
And that we can keep creating new and better things.
Absolutely.
So it's like a much bigger picture than just, these individual apps.
Exactly. And those implications extend to all of us as consumers.
Right.
Think about the impact on the products and services we use every single day. Less competition can lead to less choice, maybe even higher prices, and less motivation for companies to actually innovate and make things better.
It's like we're being boxed in by these companies.
It can feel that way.
Slowly. So is there any way to fight back? What can we do?
The source has a call to action.
Okay.
It urges consumers to be more conscious of their choices and to support small businesses and independent workers whenever possible.
That sounds good. But how do we actually do that?
Well, that's a great question and a perfect place to pause for now. We'll delve into that more in the next part of our deep dive.
Sounds good. I'm looking forward to it.
Stay tuned.
So we talked about how this is all a problem, but how do we actually fix it?
Right.
The source talks about being more, aware as consumers, but it's easy to feel kind of overwhelmed,
Oh, I get that.
Where do you even begin to change things?
It's true. The scale of it all can be pretty daunting.
Yeah.
But you have to remember that even small actions, they can have a ripple effect.
Okay, so what does that even mean? So if I buy a book from a local bookstore, instead of ordering it on Amazon, that actually makes a difference.
It does. Every time you choose to support a small business or an independent worker, you're sending a message that you value what they do, you value their contribution to the community, and that you're willing to prioritize that over, maybe convenience or a slightly cheaper price.
Right, so it's like voting with your wallet, right? Like putting your money where your mouth is.
Exactly. It's about supporting the kind of world you want to see.
Yeah.
And it's not just about how you spend your money.
Yeah. What else can we do?
We can advocate for change on a bigger level.
Okay, how do we do that?
Well, think about it like this. Who benefits from the policies that shape our economy? Are those policies designed to protect workers and small businesses, or are they more geared towards helping those big corporations?
So you're saying we need to get political, get involved and make our voices heard.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Contact your elected officials, support organizations that are fighting for fair labor practices, and just start talking about these issues with your friends and family, your community.
So it's about raising awareness, making sure that people understand what's at stake here.
Exactly. The more people know about this, the more they'll be able to make choices that align with what they believe in.
Yeah.
And those choices multiplied by millions of people, they can create real change.
Okay, so the source kind of paints this really bleak picture of what happens if we just keep going down this road. It uses some pretty strong language, like talking about the, destruction of small businesses and how independent work is just going to erode away. Do you think it's really that bad?
I think it's important to take a step back and look at the potential risks.
Okay.
Imagine a world where every single industry is controlled by just a few massive corporations.
Yeah.
Where it's almost impossible for a small business to get started because the barriers to entry are so high.
Yeah, that doesn't sound good.
No, it doesn't. It would stifle creativity.
Right. Because if everyone's working for the same companies with the same rules, there's not a lot of room for new ideas.
Exactly. Diversity and independence are essential for progress. When you lose that, we all suffer.
So it's not even just about the economics. It's like we're losing something from our society.
It is.
Like that ability to be an individual, to be creative, to be an entrepreneur.
Yeah, it's about preserving the fabric of our society.
That's a good way to put it. And that leads us to a question that the source asks. What does this all mean for you?
Right, for the listener.
Yeah, this is where it gets real, right?
It is. It's not just some abstract idea anymore.
Yeah.
It's about how these trends could directly impact your life.
Exactly.
If this continues, what kind of job options will you have?
Will the skills that I'm learning even be relevant?
Yeah. Will they be useful in a job market that's dominated by algorithms and automation?
And what about my town? Will my town just become like every other town with the same chain stores and restaurants everywhere?
That's a very real possibility.
Yeah.
And the source emphasizes how less competition leads to fewer choices and a less diverse range of options.
So we're trading convenience now for problems down the road.
It's possible.
A lot of problems.
The question is, are we willing to give up things like individuality and resilience and maybe even opportunity just to have a world that's more streamlined and homogenous?
It's a big trade-off.
It is one that we need to think about really carefully.
Yeah, this is getting pretty deep.
It is, but it's important.
But source doesn't really have like a simple answer, does it?
No, it doesn't. But what it does is empower us to be more mindful, more informed in the choices we make, both as consumers and as citizens.
So what can the listener do? Where do we go from here?
I think the biggest takeaway is that we're not helpless. We have the power to choose to support businesses that we believe in. We can fight for policies that create a fairer system.
So our choices actually matter.
They do. Every purchase you make is a vote.
Wow.
Every conversation you have is an opportunity to raise awareness.
Yeah.
We can all be part of the solution.
It feels good to hear that, that we're not just stuck, that we can actually do something.
We can, and that's a really powerful thing to remember. Even the smallest actions multiplied across a community can create massive change.
I love that. This has been a really thought-provoking conversation.
It has.
I'm definitely walking away with a lot to think about. What about you?
Me too.
Any final thoughts for our listener?
I would encourage you to revisit the source material. And think about what parts resonated most with you. What can you do to be a more conscious consumer? How can you help create a more equitable future? It's a journey worth taking.
Absolutely. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
Of course, it's been a pleasure.
We've talked about a lot of big stuff.
We have.
Big tech and how they impact small businesses, the economy, all that.
It's a lot to unpack.
It is, yeah. And now I'm thinking, this is all very interesting, but how does this actually connect to my own life?
That's the million-dollar question, right?
Yeah.
This source, it really wants us to think about how these trends are going to affect our careers and even just like the businesses we interact with every day.
So like what happens if big tech just keeps going down this road? What does it mean for like the average person?
Well, think about it this way. Will your job even exist in 10 years?
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Will the skills you're learning now be relevant in a world where algorithms and automation are calling the shots?
And will all the little stores disappear? The mom and pop shops? Will every town just be like a bunch of big box stores and chain restaurants?
It's a real concern, and the source really highlights that when you have less competition, you end up with fewer choices and less diversity in what's being offered.
And that impacts not just like what we buy, but like the feel of our communities.
Exactly. It changes the character of where we live.
So it's almost like we're getting convenience now. But in the long run, we're losing something way bigger.
It's a trade-off. And it's worth asking ourselves, is it worth it?
Yeah. Are we willing to give up all that? Our individuality, our choices just for a world that feels more...
like the same everywhere you go.
Yeah, kind of boring.
Exactly. A more homogenous world.
So what can we do?
Does the source give us any answers?
Well, not a simple one-size-fits-all solution. But it does encourage us to be more conscious, to be more informed about the choices we're making.
Yeah, as consumers and as citizens, right?
Exactly.
So what's the big takeaway here?
I think the most important thing is that we're not powerless. We get to choose. We have the power to support businesses that we believe in. We can fight for policies that make things fair.
So what I do actually makes a difference.
It does. Every purchase you make, it's like casting a vote. Every conversation you have is an opportunity to spread the word.
Wow, that's really empowering.
It is. We can all be part of making things better.
I like that a lot. Well, this has been a really interesting deep dive. Definitely given me a lot to think about. What about you?
Absolutely.
Anything else you want to leave our listeners with?
I'd say go back to the source material. Read it again and really let it sink in. Think about what really stood out to you.
What can you do differently? How can you be a more conscious consumer? How can you be an advocate for a better future?
It's a journey for sure.
It is, but it's worth it.
Absolutely. Thanks for joining us on this exploration.
Thanks for having me.
And until next time, stay curious, stay informed, and keep diving deep.